There's no policing really, except for the policing that you can afford to hire for yourself, and even that's not very trustworthy. So usually, like the richest goblins will go outside of goblin culture to call in mercs to hold things for them. Uh, but very rarely does that ever happen. It's not like they're getting. It's not like they know how to set up trade routes or send stuff out to
Hmm.
get any resources or currency that would allow them to do that. It's the exceptional or the exceptionally rare goblin that that thinks in those terms. Most of the education they have is just about how to stay alive and not get yourself killed, and almost all of that goes out the window when they have anything worth value.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked is because if the basic story of the goblins is that they've always lived in an area and a atmosphere where things are like too chaotic to ever control. Yeah, as in yeah,
Maiwa, yeah,
like
Maiwa
if there was any
situation.
social order, that it would be like a step of progress and like a really big event in the goblin culture.
Yes, it would be a gigantic event in their culture. I would say, uh, Maiwa, that's a great question. If they feel kinship, I think they feel kinship. I think they all feel kinship for one another at a certain stage in the hierarchical order. Or I think I said that correctly. Basically, all the goblins on the lowest level feel like they're brothers or are surviving through something together. As soon as someone gets something, though, it's hard not. It's hard for them not to feel jealous of that if it's not being shared directly.
Hmm. Okay, so maybe there's a concept in which other races get involved because they would be more resource rich and wouldn't have that issue.
Sure. I'm gonna put this up on the stream just to show you guys why I think that would be less of a case than it might be in our world or even in this world. It's let me go grab the map. If you look at the map and you look at C Zone Design 003 in the map design folder, the area in which the goblins live is the number 4 tile toward the north of it, up in the mountains. If I can draw like a really quick sort of real world comparison without um, pissing too many people off, it's sort of like when people try and go in and help Palestinians on the Gaza Strip. I mean, the dwarves don't want the goblins to get better, and they certainly aren't putting other people in a position to interact with them. The goblins are already sort of isolated from everyone else due to the climate they live in and the areas in which they live. Like if the goblins got more resources, there's no indication that they wouldn't use them to try and get more resources out of the dwarves. So, like, there's kind of a dwarven trade embargo on the goblin areas. It's an unofficial trade embargo, but it's kind of there.
Hmm.
And it's not like there's a terribly large expat community of goblins anywhere either, telling people about um, the horrors of their condition, what they're living through. I think it might be one or two goblins who get out every once in a while and start living somewhere else and keeping their heads down, trying to either scrap a living off of trade caravans or work as merchants somewhere.
Okay. Well, what if it's spread like a drug, like the actual technology itself?
This thing, okay,
Yeah.
through.
Like I don't know that like I think the interesting part to me is like that that one they can't seem to get out of where they are, but two there must be a way because then it's not like anything is ever like permanently isolated. So what if there's a cultural spread in which this technology does become like either so controversial or so popular that it spreads into human territory and other territories, and soon people are trying to find the guy who made this.
Huh. I hadn't thought about that, about it spreading outside of goblin culture. I think I think it's from how we've spoken about it so far, and maybe what's necessary is for us to delve more into what it actually does, what this technology actually does.
Mm.
Um, but from how I've thought about it so far, it seems like something that only the goblins would use because they're the only ones desperate enough. Or if other races were using it, they'd be sacrificing people who they didn't want, like
Yeah, to
slaves
me
that
that
they had.
there seems like a great opportunity there for people who already exploit people to keep exploiting people in a powerful way. And then there's also like going to be people that are desperate and poor in other parts of
I see.
the world who probably find opportunity in it too. So to me, like it's this interesting concept of like a powerful poor person's technology, like the AK-47. The AK-47 spread across the world not because it's like the best gun ever, but because it was really cheap and really powerful. And so it's one of the most popular guns across the world for that reason. The same thing is kind of true with this technology, in which, like, even if it was created in a small part of the world, all of a sudden everyone might want one simply because it actually makes the possibility of your quality of living going up exponentially if you're willing to use it in the right way.
Right, so let's just say that the technology is hypothetically just blood tech. Like you give blood to this thing to power it, or to these machines to power them.
Blood for the blood god.
Yeah, or something as simple as that, without going any further than that. And we can figure out what it's going to do later. But let's say that that's true, and the story arc of the goblin, this goblin specifically, is that he starts proliferating out this technology. It becomes something that people want. In goblin culture, it becomes something that dwarves are shunning because it shouldn't exist, because it's a dwarven sort of abomination that's been reappropriated by goblins. And then from there, somehow a copy of it, or somehow something gets on a trade caravan somewhere. But I mean, how does that link back to the story of this character without going into like an epilogue about it traveling? Does that mean that this guy's gonna leave?
I mean, but like, there's a few reasons why I'm interested in it. One, it's just the concept that a goblin could become more powerful than all goblins are. They're like just their culture makes them so that they're just not never going to be powerful or organized. But all of a sudden, there's this guy who has something that everybody wants, and so has the possibility to like be wealthy off of it. And off of wealth, he could have resources, and off of resources, he could possibly create a region of stability. And off of stability, lots of things could change for the goblins. So to me, it's the concept that like I don't know, it's like a huge, huge, huge thing if it would go that way.
Gives them an
Especially
advantage.
if like he starts producing it and therefore he has like the largest amount, and all of a sudden people realize it's kind of like the nuclear bomb of the region or something, and so all of a sudden people are trying to like buy him out of all of the blood tech that he has, stuff like that. Is what excites me about the concept at the moment.
I wonder if the dwarves wouldn't try and crush that as soon as they heard about it.
How
I was
far
thinking
away are
about
the
that.
dwarves?
They're like dwarf. Okay, so if we
They're
go back
right
to
under him.
the maps, um, if you go to the Zone 4, dwarven territories stretch into zone zones 3, 7, 4, 5, and that's it. Yeah, 3, 4, 5, and 7. Goblin territories are just within 4. I mean, so while the dwarves have tunnels and settlements and outposts everywhere, they've kind of pinned in the goblins.
Hmm.
So I
Okay.
think as soon as this hit any sort of critical mass where people were starting to hear about it, the dwarves would go in and just try and kill all of the goblins that they could. And maybe that's an endpoint for the story, in a way.
Oh
Either
yeah,
it does
could be.
proliferate out, or the dwarves kill them all.
I could see an
Hmm.
aristocratic dwarf try and send out a bunch of mercenaries to get this done.
Yeah. I mean, are the dwarves that cruel? Or they are? I don't know. To me, it seems like the contrast has always been that the goblins like are forced into a place of disparity and therefore must make moral sacrifices in order to survive, versus the dwarves are resource rich and like culture rich, and so they can take the higher ground when they want to.
Imagine the dwarves unwittingly creating a Manhattan Project of sorts, and then it falling into the hands of the goblins. That's more or less the
Hmm.
scenario that we've proposed.
Right.
I don't think that they'd be especially benevolent when the target of that Manhattan Project is themselves at that point. The most likely target.
Hmm. Okay.
If I'm the dwarves and I'm
Yeah.
facing whatever crisis, like as soon as that gets added to the plate and they're buyers in the southern world who want to go after that sort of thing, and it's no longer dwarven tech, we have no yield we're going to get off of it. Also, if we just morally don't agree with the method of how this thing works anymore, if it's been appropriated from us and twisted, then I think we go and try and end it.
That's an interesting concept. And then I like it. Then it also like, to me is like, do people want it, or would there be other races trying to preserve it because they see that they can benefit from it?
Depends on how early it is, like how early
Yeah.
the dwarves find out.
And then there's also the possibility of like, even though they tried to stop it, it leaks out, and then another race or some region has it already, and like the dwarf army has the possibility of spreading across several regions all of a sudden because
Yeah,
they just want to
a
stomp it
war,
out as quickly as
a
possible.
war starts around it. Yeah, okay, I like
Yeah.
this idea a lot. That could be a really interesting story.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's
Anyway,
the
what does this have to do with the end of the end of the
well,
class?
that is the end of the class, I think.
Well, that could be the end of the class's story, but what's that have to do with the end of the class skills? I guess.
We
Um,
want the skills to reflect or tell the story
right.
of the character.
I
Well,
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, I know.
I don't
I'm
know
just
what the
trying
last
to
three are going to be. That takes
say like
like
what would that be
I don't
from
know.
that?
I I I I could give you like a few guesses about where it might go,
Yeah,
but I can't give you any like
positive answers. Yeah.
positive answer. Yeah, it's going to take at least probably 3 or 4 more hours to figure out what the last three are.
Mm.
Um, but after we do, I can tell you immediately. Or what could happen is we're working through. We start getting to a point where we're stuck, and we want it to fit with the story more, and we like throw a message your way, the way of the
Yeah, you
writing
could.
team.
I mean, either way, like it's the story is ultimately still going to be more in the hands of the fight design right now more than us because we're not working on the goblin stories. So
Sure.
it's going to come down to your decisions unless you just want to leave it alone after a certain point to take it back up
We
when a writer comes back to it.
we just want to
But
draft it.
yeah,
Basically, we wanted to get through all of the ideas, all the different things that could happen with each of these different classes, and then have a more educated understanding of who the character is and what sort of conflicts they'd be getting into. Because then we can
okay,
design in a more intelligent manner rather than just saying like this, and this could happen.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, I could like we and like it. There's still so many possibilities to explore, like just from this concept. Like we're assuming that like this is the first time it's happened, but like maybe this is just a path that lots of goblins take all the time, and like people have been repeating the same pattern over and over for like a long time in goblin. It's like the Horatio Alger's myth. Like they all think, or at least some of them think that if they become like blood tech people, that suddenly because of all the power they have, they'll be able to work themselves out of all the problems that goblin culture has. But it never really works, and like all these people are warning them, and they like get together in gangs and think they're going to be like kings and whatever. There's lots of ways to take it.
yeah, that could certainly be something that we explore as well.
Yeah.
Um, so, does anyone have any closing comments for this Splicer before we move on to the Blight Mortar?
Not me.
I'm good.
Okay, Logan, Miowa.
Nope.
Okay. Um, all right. So the check Miowa's comment first. Nope. Gotcha. So the Blight Martyr is the second class we'll be looking at. He deals almost exclusively in poison. Um, he's kind of, I would say, if it weren't for the fact that his mechanics are incredibly strong, that this class would be out of the game right now because a lot of the conflicts that it's going to be facing, or at least from what I can see, are sort of more scientific or alchemical conflicts, conflicts of um, intelligence that perhaps, whether that's like machine type intelligence, technological intelligence, or chemical intelligence. They're conflicts that you'll probably see in the Splicer. And what we did recently with all the different races, or I guess not super recently, but what we did a while back was we went through and we tried to eliminate any of the classes that felt like the flip side of a coin, like the tails side to the heads story. And it used to be that all the classes were that way. There'd be a heads and a tails. Um, the Cavalier would have the captain, basically, and they would both tell a different side of the same narrative. And that was all based on dual specking as a system. And what I realized going through on the last iteration of design about 2 years ago um, was that it would be more interesting for the player if there were more differentiation than less. Uh, and that perhaps this two sides of the same coin thing wasn't going to work out anyway. So, what you have here is a class that I have no idea what the conflict or storyline looks like for it. I know that he's probably the goblin equivalent of an alchemist. I don't know much more than that. I know that he wants to use poison in combat, um, and that perhaps he has some inventions that help him. But that's all I've got.
All right then.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to make a comment? I have stuff to say, but I feel like I took over the last one.
Go for it.
Yeah, please.
All right. I don't know. So like so far, it seems like part of the goblin's skill sets, at least, are like dirty weaponry.
Mhm.
So it's the and like the first question is very, to me, is like the first question for the last one, whether like he likes using poison, because poison's considered basically like the least noble of weaponry. It's
Yes.
considered a backhanded way to kill someone. So is it because he's actually ignoble and not moralistic, or is it because it's like the only thing he has, or because it was the way he was taught, or there's lineage involved? Like,
I think
so
it's
yeah. So
yeah.
that's the first question I have. I don't know that I'm particularly interested in it, but but that's kind of the usual questions it raises as far as like uh, the question of attack, I guess.
I think it's
Um,
probably that he's that this is a norm for them because poison is so effective. It clears out different sections of cities so that you don't have to send in a large attacking force. And since they're not,
Do you think because they live in the place that they live that the raw materials needed to make poison would be more readily available?
I think the waste products necessary to make poison would be super readily available.
Okay, so
Also,
that says some.
they're in caves. I mean, poison's gonna at least gaseous poison's gonna be, you know.
Something they can harness pretty easily, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So in some ways he's a bit of a like a commoner, and
yeah.
at least amongst goblins. I realize goblins all kind of are like a commoner culture, but at least amongst them he's a lower than a higher, I guess.
Have you watched Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
You know in Breaking Bad where you see the shitty meth cooks and they have like a 60% purity,
Yeah.
and like Walt's looking at their crystal and he's like, "This is shit."
Right.
Right. That's the stuff these guys are making.
Oh man.
Yeah. Like they're basically
I can't tell if you're telling me that we're looking at Walter White
no,
or not Walter White.
but they're basically cooking crystal meth in super high batch quantities to use against. I guess I did have more. Um, they have a fairly. This class has a fairly short lifespan. The type of people who do this sort of thing have a fairly short lifespan unless they gain some form of immunity. And part of the class at one point was going to be him developing an immunity to poison and then using that to his advantage.
Hmm. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not particularly inspired in one direction or another at the moment.
sure. We could take it in the direction of it being a dual use thing, like in lower titrations, this whatever he's making is just a drug that
Hmm.
goblins use to get by or to make whatever they're living in less. I suppose that drug use would be rampant in this culture, use and abuse. And so perhaps the way in which they get people to want to develop these poisons is by hooking them on the drug and then teaching them the method.
Drug metaphors. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I
I'm
mean,
not. I'm not instantly intrigued by writing a drug metaphor story,
it
but
doesn't have to be.
no, no. But that's the system you at least set up in the beginning there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Um, I think I think if we're looking at it more as a resource and less as like drugs versus like killing people with drugs, but more like because that's not really what Breaking Bad is. It could have been something else besides drugs, and it would have
No,
worked.
yeah. Breaking Bad's about power and
Right.
ideology and things like that.
So I think that this is just the lever or the fulcrum for whatever conflict
Okay.
we've set up. It's a
Mhm.
means of empowering oneself from a very sort of low position. And certainly, we are looking at yet again another class which possesses, or an individual who possesses power in a culture where there isn't very much organized power structure.
Right. But to me, it sounds like it's a common power. It's like if he was a drug dealer amongst a city of drug dealers, which most drug dealers are. But he's
Yeah,
not breaking. He's not Walter White. He's just another
well,
run of the day drug dealer.
that's interesting too. Then
He could be a slice of life goblin story,
slice of life goblin story.
which I think would be an interesting story to do. Since I think goblin culture is turning out to be way more interesting than I first thought. Uh, it
Yeah,
would be cool to just see him live like one day in his life, and because like goblin culture is so dangerous, like every day is just incredibly fucking interesting because it's a dangerous society to be living in, and like you're bound to be involved in fights, and there's gang warfare, and just it would be it's like an interesting concept to me anyway.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I think that would be cool. Does anyone else have any ideas on which direction it could go?
Not that I can think of right now.
Um, okay, well, I'm fine with the idea being that it's like a day in the life of Blight Martyr. Um,
Is that our title?
yeah, yeah, a day in the life of the Blight Martyr.
And also 27 other classes.
I was heading to the 7-Eleven that day. Um, yeah, no, I think that would be interesting to sort of, but I wonder what the progression is of the thing that's necessary for each of these classes for us on the design front is noting kind of what the progression is from the beginning to the end of the character. Are they already at a point of parity where they understand whatever discipline they're involved in? If yes, then we start them at a different point at rank 1 than we normally would. You know, instead of building up to poison at like rank 3, we would start with poison and then go from there. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh, I
so
don't know. Like I said, I'm not like crazy. Still not like crazy inspired by the concept of it, but to me, at least, like from the concept that I talked about 3 seconds ago, I like just the concept that it's a really like personal story about a place that's already exciting and like that, or at least exciting to me. And so the interesting part of the story is not that we like take the easy way out and everything's like a drug war or something like that, but like half of the story is like very personal and that we learn about his family and his actual place and his goblin history and whether it means anything. At least in some ways, like to me, it seems the like goblin lifestyle is all about trying to be meaningful in any way.
Yeah, I would say
'Cause-
incredibly individualistic.
well, I don't know about that. Like, just even like basely meaningful. Like, if you live in a ghetto, the concept is that you die in the ghetto, right? To me, that seems like more and more like what the Goblin place is like everyone is born there, stays poor, gets involved in some awful thing, and dies being a goblin. Like the concept that he could have a normal life, or at least pretend to have a normal life, or attain one element of a normal life, uh, is like a luxury, and
Okay.
therefore like a really valuable, treasured thing.
Well, I like that. I think that we should certainly pursue that here, but I also think then that we should have an expat goblin as one of our classes.
You think you should escape?
I think we should have someone who's already escaped living somewhere else.
Oh, okay, all right.
And we have two classes remaining for that, and I think there's one that it makes more sense for than the other.
Hmm.
I don't know if this next are we done discussing the Blight Martyr for now, Liz?
I am.
Okay. Um,
I don't know who else. Henry, Iowa.
any other? Sort
Yeah,
of-
sounds good.
Okay. Um, all right. So the next class is the Vagrant. I think that probably a few things will change about the Vagrant. I don't know exactly how many. Um, name wise or abilities wise, ability wise, I should say, rather than the plural. But when we first make this class, we wanted a kind of a skulking robber type, someone who's lurking in the alleys, basically, um, and if not robbing you, then probably killing you and then robbing you. Just the worst element of goblin culture that we could find. And his whole kit was based around auto attacking rather than having abilities. He would just attack each turn and have passives that augmented his attacks, and sometimes actives that allowed him to interact with what you were doing. And so we were taking the idea of a thief and kind of hyper actualizing it, making it as brutal as we could.